Do you like shiny things? Good, then it's polishing time. So polishing is the process of basically putting smaller and smaller scratches into the surface of the metal so that it reflects more and more light and appears to us shinier and shinier. There's lots of different ways to polish. In the T-Light video, I showed you just a basic, quick polishing compound called Simichrome that you can apply and just buff onto it. I wanted to have this video just to give a quick intro into a couple different ways to polish using buffs. So what we have here is a polishing buff. You can get these from any jewelry supply company. The important thing is that you need to have a different buff for each polishing compound and material that you're going to be using. So getting started with it can be a little bit of expense to get started. So typically I like to use at least 3 different compounds. I start with bobbing, which is the most abrasive, and then moving to white diamond, and then depending on the finish, you can either go with some rouges or a general purpose product called Fabulester. So I'm going to show you both quick polishing on the lathe as well as on a polishing machine. I wanted to start on the lathe because if there's wood turners interested in this, you probably don't have a polishing machine, but some of the metalsmiths and jewelers may already have that. So have my lathe here. I have a 4-jaw chuck set up in the lathe, and then I have an arbor from a polishing machine. You can make these your own or find them as a spare part or something. I have that set into the 4-jaw chuck and tightening the buff onto that arbor. And then what you'll need to do, and you can see that this is labeled with bobbing so I don't get them mixed up, and you want to start it, and always you're going to be working, if you think of this as a clock face, in the lower front quadrant of this. As it's spinning down towards you, you always want to work passively into the buff in this quadrant. So not up top because it can grab it and throw it down, or too far behind because it can reach out of your hands. The metal can heat up from the friction of polishing, but I generally don't recommend wearing gloves because unless they're really tight fitting, they can become loose and tangled in with the buff and cause another problem. You also want to be sure that there's nothing dangling at all that could get caught in with any equipment that's rotating. So I'm going to get this started and then it's called charging the buff when you apply the compound to it. So you have the compound going passively into that lower quadrant. You want to see a slight sheen of the compound on the buff. I have just an old kind of grungy copper spinning that I did that needs to be cleaned up. So I'm not going to go in with the edge to the buff. Again, always passively working along that surface. As you start, you may see some of the compound discharge onto the metal, but that'll get rubbed back off as you continue polishing. Now you can't rely on this for removing a lot of materials. So as you're spinning, let me see if you can kind of you can see some of the lines from the spinning. Polishing is not going to take those out. It's just going to refine the surface and get a nice kind of sheen to it there. So the process is essentially the same whether you're working on a lathe or on a polishing machine. But I'm going to take us on over to the polishing machine and show you that setup. So this is the polishing machine that we have in our studio. Functions the same way, this motor driving the spindle as opposed to the lathe driving that. It's going to get a little noisy when I turn it on because it has a filtration fan in the back. It's also helpful, it has built-in lights so that you could see the polishing pieces as you're going. Once I turn it on, then I'll charge the buff again. Clean up another area of the piece here. So as you can see, that's a nicely shiny, cleaned up surface from the older kind of patinated piece that it was. If you desired a higher sheen, then like I said, there's additional polishing products that you could go to. You would, the next step I would make would be to a product called White Diamond, and then a separate buff. And then if you wanted to go even further, another buff with another compound, depending on the materials, different kind of rouges, or like I said, an overall kind of product called Fabulester. So that's just kind of the basics of polishing to get you started. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to hit that subscribe button so that you can hear from me when I post future videos. Thanks for stopping by.